Nessa girl, I just almost fell off this damn stool, but I'm starting to say, I just watched an hour of some very painful TV. I don't know if Iyanla is fixing people's lives or fucking up the church's money. I will say this, y'all. Iyanla, before we even get into the review, what Iyanla has been able to do over there at the OWN network is nothing short of amazing. And if you look at the progression of Iyanla Fix My Life, she has really gone and getting some of those powerful cases out there and shedding a lot of light on a lot of pain. And I'm going to tell you something. One thing that I like about Iyanla Fix My Life, and I don't know if they do this consciously or not, but I really feel like she addresses a lot of issues, don't get me wrong, that affect families across the board, but I think a lot of things that affect African Americans culturally, especially when it comes to our familiar relationships. I love all of that. So did you get into last night's episode? Really quickly, Nessa girl, the episode was about Kamaya Mobley, the young baby that was kidnapped from the hospital at 8 hours old, raised by her abductor. She had a great life. This woman is her mother. She's now in jail. And she's in a conundrum because she's stuck between being who she was born as, Kamaya, and who she lived as for 18 years, Alexis, and also reconciling still loving her abductor as her mom, the woman that raised her, versus the woman that birthed her, and dealing with the fallout of it all. So that's the short of it. You gotta go see it. It's really good. Now let's just get into the real nitty gritty. At the very end of the day, Kamaya and her family ended up walking away. The girl ended up cussing the dog fuck out of Iyanla and she left. I'm gonna tell you something. I felt a kind of way that this even aired. I am of the mindset, much like that Married to Medicine episode, when they said, if you take the lid off of a can of worms, you've got to find a way to put the lid back on the can. I'm stuck trying to reconcile that with, but we still got a show to make, and we still made all this money trying to produce this. I mean, we spent all this money trying to produce this episode, and we got to get something out of it, but I don't think it should have aired. Granted, when I went to Florida State University and got my degree in economics, the people ain't teach me nothing about psychology and mental health. I think this has made things worse. I think, and so it has me side-eyeing the hell out of Iyanla, because I'm like, if your ultimate goal is for you to be your highest self and your best self and to help people, could an executive decision not have been made? I mean, could have been made to not air this. But then the business side of me is like, shit, bitch, we don't spend $60,000, $70,000 trying to produce this episode. Oh no, we gonna reconcile these chips. So let's address that first. Do y'all think it should have aired? Let's talk about that. Here's what I think the underlying issue is, and here's what I learned from this episode. And I'm guilty of this. We create these fantasies and these fairy tales in our head of what an ideal situation would be. And then we're like, oh my God, I would feel so complete and so whole in my situation if it looked like this. And then when it doesn't look like this and we fall short of that goal, now we all toe up on the damn insides and don't know what to do without realizing I'm low-key being prisoner to my own fairy tales. And if we let go of the fairy tale or what the image of the perfect life or perfect situation would be, and learn to deal in the present and in the reality, which is hard to do, because me personally, I experienced that now with my own family. In a perfect world, my parents were divorced. In a perfect world, I would have been able to go to Red Lobster. My mom would have been able to sit down with my dad and my stepmom, and we've been one big happy family. That never happened. I always had to choose between two families for events. I had to choose between events. Even now, in a perfect situation, I would love to be able to just call my dad and be like, you know what, let's just go to lunch and have a cocktail and let's have a kiki. And he's just not that kind of person. You know what I'm saying? He doesn't have the emotional wherewithal to be that. He's very closed and very, if it ain't broke, don't touch it. And for a lot of years, I found myself being mad with him because I wanted the dad that I see on TV. I wanted the dad that comes to games, takes me to sporting events, drives to go get a hot dog, helps me wash my car, help me put Amarol on my tire. I wanted this picture perfect dad, and not that anything is wrong with the one I got. But when I learned to let that fairy tale go and to just deal with my family situation where it is, it made things better. It still bothers me, but I'm able to cope slightly better. So I think for Kamaya, her mom and her biological mom and her biological dad, they had been holding on to the fairy tale all their lives. If only our baby was here, we would have been one big happy family. All right, 18 years go by, you think your child is dead, you move on with life as best you can. Then your child comes back into your life and you're feeling like, oh my God, this is a miracle. So fairy tales and fantasies do come true. Now that my baby is back in my life, let's start living the fantasy right now. And it didn't happen. Because the reality of the situation is, and I'm sorry, 18 years old, and I learned this from Iyanla, it's too late to be trying to foster a mother, daughter, father, son relationship. It's just, you can't, the dynamics are just not there. The bonding period has come and gone. Now we can foster a relationship as two adults, but as far as I'm concerned, and I hate how cold and callous this is about to sound, the woman who birthed Kamaya is not our mother. And it's unfair, and she's been robbed of the opportunity to be her mother, but she's not. The lady that's in jail is that girl mama. And I think the issue that they're having and the issue that I'm having is, how do you heal two people who require something of one another in order to heal, but what each one needs from each other is counter each person's interest? Kamaya's biological mom, for part of her healing, needs Gloria to be completely erased from history, and just she and Kamaya, and they sail off into the sunset. That's what she needs, or that's what at least she thinks she needs. As part of her illusion and her fantasy and her fairy tale does not involve Gloria. And you're right. How do you reconcile, in order for me to have a relationship with my child that I've been estranged from for 18 years, I have to accept Gloria too? That's a hard pill to swallow, and I'm sorry, I don't think enough Iyanla, TD Jakes, or therapy gonna help a lot of people get over that. I think the father is a bit more willing and a bit more capable. How can I say this nicely? But he gives me a simplicity. That's a good word. He's kind of a simpleton to me. And it makes me question, does the father even have the wherewithal and the capacity to deal with any of this? And I think not. Again, I'm not a trained professional, nor am I qualified to speak on IQ and whatever, but I just get the impression that his mind kind of stopped developing at a, junior high school age. He's not, so you've got Gloria in jail, you got the mom who is absent, and I want to be mad at the biological mom for calling Iyanla and not even coming, but I can't. Just the way my compassion is set up, I can't. But why is it that y'all think the lady didn't show up, being that she's the one who initiated the contact? Me personally, I think that she kind of knows in her heart of hearts that she has to accept Gloria being that girl's mom, despite how unfair it is to her and how she's been robbed of the opportunity to be a mom. And I just think she's not ready yet. That's why why y'all think she didn't come? Something very profound Iyanla said when she spoke about Kamaya being at the beginnings of what breeds the angry black woman. Like, I was so excited when this show came on, because I was like, oh my God, she's such a sweet girl and she's so courageous for doing this. And then somewhere along the process, that sweet little girl went out the window and this mean, nasty, vile gutter snipe, as Iyanla would say, emerged. I just had this conversation with my best friend Donnie yesterday. Last night we talked. I am of the belief that all people are born inherently good. Fucked up things happen to people that make them the way they are. And when you see somebody cutting up, or somebody treating people wrong, or somebody doing something, I try for your hardest to have enough compassion to look past what they're doing and to say something happened to you. Something wrong with you. Because that response that that girl had was not normal. She was angry. She was an angry black woman. She was the, epitome and the antithesis of everything that stereotype marks and denotes. But there's a reason why. And so oftentimes I tell people, try to step away from the what they're doing and get down to the why. And it's not always easy, because shit, you got your own shit going on too. When somebody cussing you out crazy and acting stupid, you ain't got time to understand why. You hit them back with an emotional response. But I say all that to say the moral of the story is, when you see somebody out there cutting up, listen, nobody wakes up every morning and says, I want to walk around and be miserable and cuss people the fuck out. No one says that. That's no one's prayer the night before. Life circumstances turn people, change people, and make them what they are. And this girl's situation, to be honest, I was looking at this whole thing feeling like, Iyanla, I don't even think you qualified to deal with this. Like, this is some real, we need some textbook and some prayer. You know what I'm saying? Maybe a little bit of healing. To deal with this, I wish this girl so much success. I hope maybe that this show fosters the beginning of some healing. I want to talk about something else too, especially in the black family, familiar relationships. My grandmother used to clean, uneducated, poor, from the back dirt roads of Georgia. Our family used to be, some of them used to be sharecroppers. And then they ended up moving to Miami because somebody told my granddaddy that there was some work in Miami. My grandma moved her, my mom, my aunt to Miami. And my grandma used to clean houses for rich people. Like, that's how she provided for our family. And my grandfather died, and my grandma had to raise my mom and my aunt on her own, being basically a domestic maid, cooking and cleaning and raising other people's children. When I was born, my grandmother was adamant about nobody else raising me or putting me in a daycare. So she stopped working. My mom paid the bills. My grandma took care of me. Essentially, the earlier parts of my life, my grandmother was my mother for all intents and purposes. I ran to my grandmother for comfort. I ran to her for safety. I ran for her for food, for everything. She raised me. At about 13, 14 years old, I was in late middle school. My grandma was living with us, and something had happened, and we got into a dispute, and I yelled out, gosh, stop, you not my mama. Leave me, why you talking? You not my mama. And any other time that I would have spoken to my grandmother like that, and I'd have used any other words, I probably would have got slapped in my mouth. But it was something about me saying those words that cut her to the white meat. And my family, we are not touchy-feely, emotional people, and explain. We go through trauma and pretend it didn't happen. Like my parents, my people will cut you with a knife and then ask you what you want for dinner. And it was the one and only time in my life that I remember, or a few times, that my mom pulled me to the side and just had a very vulnerable conversation with me. And she was like, I really think you hurt mama when you said that. And I can remember the look on my grandmother's face that, yes, something in this moment was different. And I will say, emotionally and mentally, I think in that moment, my grandmother gave me up to the universe, because our relationship was forever altered. She was grandma, but she was no longer my mama. I think she had to realize too, as much as I love this kid, as much as I poured into this kid, I stopped working to nurture and take care of this kid. I'm not his mama. And she took a step back and she stepped out of mama and into grandma. And I told that whole long story, to drive home this point, that many times in families and in black families in particular, the dynamic, the power structure can get very weird and convoluted. And, I've got this role by birth that I'm supposed to play, but this surrogate is doing what I'm supposed to be, and I've got to reconcile this, that, and everything else in between. And that's what it was with my mom. My grandmother, for all intents and purposes, was a second mother to me, but she wasn't my mother. And how do you reconcile? I put my blood, sweat. My grandma put more into me than she probably put into her own kids. You know what I'm saying? But she was not my mother. Then my mother had to sit back and watch how I had more respect for my grandmother than I did for her. And quite frankly, in our house, if my mama told me I couldn't do something, but my grandma said I could, I listened to my grandmother. So that had to be odd for my mother, knowing she pushed me out and has to show respect to her mother, but yet her mother is encroaching. It's just a lot. And Iyanla, this episode brought all that into play for me, just the power structure and dynamics of families and black families in particular. What's y'all thoughts on this? Like, this one was deep, and I wish I could. I don't know if I'm able to mess with Iyanla all season, if she gonna have me over here pouring out my soul and doing all this healing. But y'all, it was deep. Let's drop that in the comments and talk about it. What's your experience? Who do you relate to? God knows I wish Kamaya would have had the opportunity to sit down and talk with the other young lady who healed from this situation. I would love to know more about her story and more background. I guess maybe I can Google it. But let's talk about it, y'all. What's your background? How do you feel? This episode, did Iyanla help these people, or did she fuck up the church's money? Let's take a vote. I'll call you back, girl. Back.